Hello everyone, I'm Paul and I have Mike Cord with me. And we're going to be talking about all things trail shoes. This will be a beginner level video where you can learn about what kind of shoes to get with running on the trail. And one of the first beginner questions I get is, can I use my road shoes for running on the trail? Mike?
That's a hard no. Do you want to know why?
Absolutely. Tell us why you should not run on trails with your road shoes.
So a consistent theme I think we're going to come on in this video today is terrain, and the main difference between running on a road and off a road is the nature of the terrain. On the road, the terrain is going to be very hard, and so the shoes that are designed for doing that are going to be about 100% different than the shoes that we're going to be talking about here that are designed for running on much softer, rockier, rootier surfaces. Paul, maybe you can explain why, if you were to try to run on a trail in your road shoes, or if you were to try to run on the road in your trail shoes, why that's a bad idea.
Both of them are inefficient, ultimately. When you try to run on a trail with your road shoes, you're going to slip, and the lack of protection on the bottom of the shoe is going to let you injure your foot if you run over rocks or roots too hard. And if you try to run on the road with your trail shoes are going to be too stiff, and you're going to feel a lot of vibration and impact in the foot, and you're going to wear out the bottom lugs really quickly. And the lack of responsiveness on the trail is going to basically slow down your time a lot. It takes a lot more effort to run on pavement with trail shoes than road shoes. So you need a shoe for the surface that you're running on, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
So before we get into what I think will be, like I said, we'll be talking about mostly, which is terrain, I think there's three things that I like to think about when I'm trying to choose shoes, regardless of terrain, and that's going to be fit, cushioning, and support or stability. I think those three things, when you're choosing your trail shoes, you'll think about in a similar fashion to the way you think about it when you're considering your road shoes. And so we won't talk about that as much, but what we will talk about is how to choose different trail shoes depending on what kind of trail terrain you're considering running on, and then also what your personal preference is for how your run is going to feel.
Okay, so up front, the shoes that we have, these are the Solomon Speedgo 5s, Glassberg Tiva Bushido 2. These are the Cascadia 16s from Brooks. These are the 14s. Shoes do vary from year to year. These are the Saucony Peregrine 12s, Lone Peak 5 from Ultra, Timp 1.5s from Ultra, and then the Hoka Speedgo 4. These are some of the most popular shoes for good reasons. They're some of the best in each class, but each one of these shoes is very different, and depending on the kind of trail and the kind of runner you are, there may be a good choice or a bad choice. Why don't we start with the Cascadias, and we'll work our way through the list.
All right, so the Cascadias, I think, are maybe my favorite or most commonly used trail shoe. We got Paul's Cascadia 16s here. I also have a pair of 16s that I'm just starting to break in, and these are my Cascadia 14s from 2 iterations ago. These are actually the same size shoe, although Paul's, I think, are in a wide.
Yep.
But what you can see between the 14 and the 16 is the 16 has really bumped out the amount of cushioning and structure on the bottom of them. And that actually provides a much more stable, somewhat stiffer, more protected ride compared to the 14.
Compared to some of the shoes we'll talk about today, the Brooks also have a stronger toe box and generally more support around the outside with welding. It'll let you run through more difficult shrubs and things like that than some shoes, such as the Cascadia 16, wasn't nearly as built out.
Or the Ultra Timp 1.5, which I think has a very, very, very soft, plush, almost upper on it, as compared to like the Ultra Lone Peak, which you can actually see here. I think this is like ripstop nylon or some material like that, where it's just really going to protect you from a lot of things that might snag it. Where you can see, in terms of durability, yes, they're very soft, but you can see that I've popped holes in the sides of the upper of my Timp 1.5.
And for me, who likes a more durable shoe, I find even the 5s to be not enough support for running. I like to not be worried about twisting stuff as much, which is why I would prefer the Cascadias myself. So moving down the line, I have been running the Bushidos, which are a very popular shoe from La Sportiva because they don't make La Sportivas in wide. If you are a wide foot runner like me, these are the best shoes. They're some of the only shoes you can get. The only ones I don't have are the On Cloud Ultras because they're $179. I bought them. But these are almost all the wide shoe options you have. They're still some of the best shoes. Mike can tell you a little bit about his experience with the Sportiva. Ultimately, though, I think he found it to be a very hard shoe and not good for a good number of trails, but more I guess to be very, very rocky trails.
Yeah, and so that's actually kind of going to be the continuum that we have laid out here, starting at like this side with the Speedcross and the Bushido. We have shoes that are designed really for fairly soft terrain, muddier terrain, what you would consider to be more technical terrain, and so they're less designed for being on, let's say, a flatter but rockier surface, and more designed for getting up hills and over rocks and through lots of nasty stuff. And so what that means is these, you may be able to see here, they have these hard plastic pieces on the instep, and on the outside it makes them very, very stable for getting over loose rocks. They have a very, very protected toe and hard traction bottom, but they're incredibly stiff. Okay, that's great for when you're trying to push off from rock to rock. That is not so good when you're trying to log long, consistent, comfortable miles, even on trails. And so I really wouldn't run more than 3 to 5 miles in these. And honestly, I've been using them for gravel riding because they are great push-off platform for pedals.
With Speedcross 5s, they're actually, despite looking like they're not flexible, they're actually very flexible. I haven't had any trouble with that. They are good on any surface, gravel and wood chips and dirt. They're just not good on pavements. The higher the lugs are, all that rubber has no give to it, and so it's a lot like running on pavement with cleats on.
I mean, it's almost exactly like running on pavement
Pretty
with
much.
cleats on, which again is why you wouldn't want to run on pavement or pavement-like surfaces with the Speedcross. I think Paul is more willing to run on pavement-like surfaces with them than I am, but that would definitely turn me off from running in those. But you can see they have teeth. They're going to bite into whatever surface you're running on, and if that surface is pavement, they are going to bite and lose. If it's mud, or if it's getting up a really difficult hill or down a hill where you need that kind of traction, those shoes are going to be great for that. But they may be less great for what I would consider less technical trail running, which you might find around here in situations where you have just a dirt path that's nice and hard packed down. Maybe hasn't rained in a while.
Yeah, I don't find I have any trouble with the cushioning when I'm dealing with gravel and stuff with these shoes. It's really the pavement. One thing I like about these shoes too is I love the speed lacing system. It's super fast. It doesn't come out. This is a super strong cable that they use. I wish more shoes would come with this speed lacing. I haven't liked other speed lacing systems, but Solomon really, I think, nailed it when it comes to that.
Solomon also has, you show the lace keeper up here, so the speed laces actually tuck into the top of the tongue. Brooks actually tried to do that on the 14, where you can tuck your tied laces up into this lace keeper, and they actually switched away from that with the 16, where you have this little lace holder here. Super important for trail shoes. I don't think they make those types of things on many road shoes, but for trail shoes, it's really critical to be able to keep your laces out of the way of your run.
One thing that they did really well on the Brooks, and they did it on the Peregrines too, I really like it when shoe companies give you a choice of where you put the last lace. It can make a really big impact of whether a shoe is sloshing around on you or whether it's firmly fitting. So when I look for shoes, I try to find ones with multiple eyelets. I think the way the Brooks did it is pretty excellent. Cascade.
And that goes back down to what we talked about earlier, which is fit.
Yep. The Peregrines just have 2, but for me, I tried it with the top one. I was like, I got to return these. I put on the bottom one. I was like, oh, it works.
Right. Introduce these guys properly really quick. These are the Saucony Peregrine 4s?
12s.
Sorry, Peregrine 12. Sorry. That's you notice some of these numbers are really high, like the Cascadia 16. That means there's 16 iterations of this shoe. It's been around for a long time. It's like a trail classic. Similarly, the Peregrine, same kind of deal. there's 12 iterations of this one.
I have the 11s and 12s. I really, really like the 11s. The 12s are a little bit lighter. The best thing that I like about this shoe is that it is probably the best traction of any trail running shoe I've used, especially for downhill hard surfaces. There's something, that they made about the material in there that just really, it's kind of like being on a rails, and you can just really go all out. These are also kind of a very balanced shoe. They have a 4mm heel drop, where the Cascadia 16s have 8, and the different heel drop changes, your mobility in terms of running. Some people need a 0 heel drop, like we have in the Lone Peaks, not me, but other people. And then some people, do better with a bigger heel drop. That's a big reason I like the Cascadias. A larger heel drop is easier for me to run because my calves aren't as mobile as some people's.
So let's expand on that for a second, because we're talking here as we're going from sort of the stiffer, more technical shoes, and we'll probably finish up with the Hoka Speedgo, which is the most cushioned shoe that we have here. Really, like Paul said, all of these brands, Ultra, Saucony, Brooks, Hoka, Salomon, to a lesser extent La Sportiva, they're your most popular trail brands. Nike's in the trail area too with the Pegasus, and that's one that we don't have here. That was very popular. But these are some of the most commonly used trail shoes, particularly the Peregrine, the Speedgo, and the Brooks Cascadias. When we're talking about heel-toe drop, it's not something you talk too much about with your road shoes, although there are people that run in what we call zero-drop shoes for road. Your road shoe is going to have somewhere between 10 and 12 millimeters of drop between the heel of the shoe, which is where your heel hits, and the toe of the shoe, which is where your toe hits. And so you're slightly angled towards your toe in a road shoe, and that's really to protect your heel from impact on the pavement over and over and over again. With trail shoes, they tend to have lower drops, generally starting at 8 millimeter, like the Cascadia, going down to like a 4, like the Peregrine, or full zero drop, which you find on the Ultra Lone Peak and all the Ultra shoes and the Ultra 10 1.5 here. And what that means when you're in zero drop is you now have 8 to 10 to 12 millimeters more distance that your heel has to traverse in every step as you put your heel onto the ground before you push off. That can be an advantage. Some people really like it, but it's going to lengthen out your calf, and it's going to really require you to grow into that for most people. For Paul in particular, you may never grow into that.
Probably not.
But it will kind of help lengthen your calves, lengthen your Achilles tendon, but it also may put unwanted stress and pressure on that. The advantage to having that lower heel-toe drop, so I'm told, is it's going to naturally put your foot into a better position for handling trail terrain, which is more up on your forefoot, and really where you're supposed to be running anyway, to have that forefoot toe off. Yep. It's going to be less protective from impacts on your heel, but the idea is you're not going to have as high impact to run because you're on softer terrain on the trail.
So one thing you may see on some of the shoes, and just to give you an idea on this, right? So some shoes will have a nice loop for getting them in, like these have an okay loop. It's not the best loop I've seen. Where like the Hoka's loop, that makes it really easy to get in. Some shoes don't even have loops, right? And that's a big thing with how easy it is to change your shoes. Also, some shoes, for example, like our Lone Peaks, allow for Gators, right? Which will attach here and here. What Gators do is they keep a lot of the dirt and debris outside of your foot, which can be very handy if you're running through a lot of surfaces. Not all shoes have them. And I have found that most time if you buy a certain brand shoe, you need that brand Gator because the attachment mechanisms are different brand to brand. So you might want to think about that. If you're keeping with the same brand, you can use Gators, across the different shoes if they're the same brand.
It also depends on, what level of dust and dirt and rock you're running in. I personally typically don't run in Gators, but they can be very helpful to keep stuff from getting in the tops of your shoe. So don't let that intimidate you. It's not necessarily something you're going to have to go trail running, but you may find that the conditions that you're in will warrant that, and then you're really going to want to think about how those Gators are going to attach to the shoes that you buy.
I don't think the Cascadia 16s don't have a Gator in the back or the front.
They have a Gator attachment in the back. I do not know where the Gators go on the front, because like I said, I don't run in Gators.
I don't have Gators for this either. I do have them for the Lone Peaks. They work great. Let's tell you about the Hokas and how they're different than maybe the Cascadia 16s. The Hokas have the thickest stack of any of our running shoes here. It gives you the most cushion. They're excellent for hard surfaces, and they're also can be used even for running on pavement in limited distances, which works really nicely. The extra cushioning will add instability when the surface is really muddy. It has a less aggressive tread than, for example, the Cascadia 16. Right, you can see the lug spacing and stuff is bigger and spacer, but that's not good for pavement. Right, for this, the smaller it is, generally the better it is for pavement. So there's a balancing of this one. Both of these shoes are pretty good protection-wise from different things you'd run on. The thick stack and cushioning on this will protect you from most things you run on, whereas in the Cascadia 16s, they have a ballistic rock plate, which is really good for protecting you. It will stop things from hitting through your shoe, which is the whole point.
Yeah. And it's generally, when we talk about a ballistic rock plate, what we're talking about is a piece of hard plastic in between the insole of the shoe and the cushioning stack.
So one shoe up here that doesn't have either of those technologies is the Peregrines. The Peregrines have neither a rock plate nor a ton of cushioning. And does that make you susceptible to getting injured? I find not as much of this one because the stability and the steering of this shoe is really, really good, and it lets me avoid stepping on things, but I have to be much more careful. I can barrel through stuff with the Cascadias or the Hokas because of the cushioning or the rock plate. When I'm running the Peregrines, I have to be a little more careful where I place my foot because it could hurt if I run on something that's too sharp or too hard.
As an example, show this, the bottom of my Temp 1.5s have, see if I can capture that on the camera here, this very obvious dent or divot from a rock that I ran on. You definitely don't want that coming through your shoe, but you also don't want to feel that even if it's less risky than penetrating all the way through the bottom of your shoe. So these shoes I wouldn't necessarily recommend for heavy, rocky terrain. They're going to be better for really getting deep into the mud and clawing your way through mud.
So let's close up with a suggestion as to maybe where you might use these particular shoes. To give you an idea, a lot of people watching this are looking to buy their first pair of shoes, and we'll just give our thoughts. I would say that for the Salomons, they are probably the most popular shoe for obstacle course racing when you know the surfaces are not going to be paved and you're going to have a good amount of mud, which is going to go with that.
Mud that's created on purpose to be deep and nasty and muddy.
Yes, and for that, they're really good. Although I will tell you, in obstacle courses, a lot of times you have to use your feet to climb up obstacles, and these are not good for that because you run, again, limited traction on flat surfaces, so if you need your feet for traction, you're going to suffer on those obstacles. For the Peregrines, I find them the best on harder surfaces that have lots of up and downs, so if you're in a drier climate, or if you're really trying to get maximal speed, the extra grip I find helps me with that. The Cascadia 16s are kind of like, I think, the most protective shoe up here, and it kind of, it's like running with tanks on your feet, and that can let you run faster because you don't have to slow down. And you slow down a lot when you trail run, you can slow down less. That's still going to kind of help counteract some of the fact the shoe might be a little stiffer, a little heavier. Well, if you don't slow down as much, you're still going to run faster.
And Brooks purposefully designed the iteration of the 16 to do that. Essentially, they were trying to make like a trail tank or a trail SUV, I think is how some people have described it.
I think they succeeded at it. I'd say balance everything really well.
The reviews on the 16 are really, really positive. And personally, I've done one long run of them so far, and I'm coming out of a version of Cascadia 14, and they're a great improvement, super comfy, very, very versatile shoe.
For the Lone Peak 5, these are my least favorite shoes for me. They're the ones I have.
These are also your zero drop shoes.
These are my zero drop, and that's the big reason. Well, there's two reasons I don't like them. One is the zero drop. The other thing is they're very minimal protective on bottom, and so you really have to be careful where you're stepping on these. They're designed to be a very natural running shoe, minimal running shoe. Turns out I don't like minimal running shoes.
And that's actually true for Ultra across the board, with the exception of the Olympus, which is their maximalist cushioning version, which is kind of like a strange hybrid between the minimalist zero drop platform but with a Hoka level of cushion.
So I probably wouldn't buy another minimalist trail shoe either for the same reason. Although I think the Lone Peaks are probably the best regarded minimal running shoe right now from Ultra. A lot of people really like them.
People love them. They just came out with the 6th iteration of those that have gotten pretty good reviews. But again, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and it might be something to have as like a secondary pair, which is what I use my Tip 1.5s for. The Tip design has really evolved since the 1.5. They're about to come out with the 4. So I don't know if they're going to be similar, but these things were my favorite running shoe for quite some time, at least for trail, because they have just a very, very soft feel in the upper. They're nowhere near as durable as the Lone Peak, and so you can see where I've started to tear my way through the upper. That's typically a complaint for Ultra, but they were incredibly comfortable. You can see, we haven't talked about this yet, the toe box of them is shaped like your foot, which allows your foot to splay naturally when you tread, which is somewhat different than, let's say, the Peregrine, which has a more traditionally shaped toe box.
I buy wide shoes to avoid that whole issue.
These are wides though?
I only run in wides.
Even the wides, you can see shape-wise, the Ultras have a ton more room in the toe box. But then in the forefoot, they're designed to still hold your foot firmly in place. But again, these were my shoes that are softer. They don't have all the protection like Paul was saying, neither do the Lone Peaks. So they're really good for muddier, softer dirt terrain. And then I reserve my Cascadias for really good general purpose. They can do the soft stuff okay, but then also they can do the rock scrambling. They can do running protracted distances on switchbacks and your more traditional hiking trails.
And before we go to the Hokas, Mike mentioned one difference between shoes is kind of the durability, right? Some shoes are going to have more reinforced tops and things. The Cascadias have, so the whole thing is really welded and it's really strong shoe in terms of like its protection, whereas the Peregrines are not nearly as protected, but that protection comes across in terms of cost. It also increases the weight of the shoe. So it's a balancing where they spend more money on the bottom of these shoes to make that traction. They took money from there, Brooks put it there. And so how you balance those things really depends on what you're looking for. I try not to run underneath too many trees with these.
Yeah, well that's also, as we're talking about these elements, back to the front of the video, these are key differences between trail shoes and road shoes. Your trail shoes are going to have these reinforcements to try to protect your foot and protect the shoe, as well as these things are going to give you better tread and better grip, which are just unnecessary for road shoes.
Okay. And then the last shoe on our list, the Hoka Speedgo 4s. I like these a lot when I'm doing hard running surfaces because of the extra cushioning.
Hard but not road hard.
You can run on the road, but it's gonna wear the shoe faster, and you're not as efficient at it. I have the Hoka Ringcon 3s, which are their road shoes, Hoka's minimal road shoes, which are about the same stack as this one.
Yep.
They're way lighter, way faster, and they're more efficient at preserving your energy. Where these feel like, it's going to slow you down a lot. So, you can run, a couple miles if you need to because it's a mixed paved and dirt trail, but generally you'd want to keep to the same surface. When looking at these as a road shoe, your harder surfaces is really where they're going to shine. These shoes are also really good from a drainage point of view. Some of these shoes are really good. Brooks did a great job on adding drainage ports. How fast a shoe can go from wet to not so wet never gets dry. Less wet is an important thing because you can be running through streams and in mud and stuff. Your foot will get wet. Running with heavy wet shoes is not good. Some shoes it can take a long time, which is why both Mike and I, we don't run with Gore-Tex shoes. I don't run with Gore-Tex shoes. They don't make them in wide, so it's not even available to me. But Gore-Tex shoes, which are most of these shoes come in Gore-Tex,
the waterproof material.
If you're going to be running through streams, it's really not going to help you. Gore-Tex is best if you're going to be running in rain. Even snow, I don't find it gets into the shoe too much because the same material that keeps it waterproof stops it from moving out of the shoe, and then you'll have wet feet the whole time. Plus, my feet get really hot in Gore-Tex again because you can't release the heat because Gore-Tex.
Sacrifice breathability. Another way to say that, right?
But they're very, very durable, which is a nice thing. Gore-Tex is very strong material and they'll last a long time.
And so generally, we're probably not going to recommend Gore-Tex unless you are going to be running in very wet conditions. However, if you're going to be running through streams, these shoes generally are all going to be great for that because they're all going to be designed to drain as fast as possible and to try to get you from submerged to mostly dry. I don't know, depending on the weather conditions. I find that if you're running out there long enough, you actually can get the dry again, Paul.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to shed water and they're going to allow you to do that transition between running through the water and getting back to the rest of your run as seamlessly as possible.
So if you could only have one running trail shoe, which one would it be?
For me, it's going to be the Cascadias. I think because of just their versatility, they do a little bit of all of these things very well. Whereas, like, you know, my Bushidos or the Solomons are going to be more purpose driven. So, like, if you're obstacle course racing and you're going to be a place where you know it's going to be mud and you're going to want a cleat-like shoe, that's what you're going to have those for. I don't do a whole lot of that, and so I don't really have the shoe for that. I run in the Cascadia because the trails I run are going to be very diverse. They're going to have a mix of sometimes mud, sometimes streams, sometimes climbing up rocks, and the Cascadia does all of that very well. It's a versatile shoe.
For me, it'd be the Peregrines. I agree with everything Mike said. The Peregrines are not quite as, they don't have quite as much support. They don't have quite as much durability. They're a little bit lighter, and I like the advancement, the more powerful tread that they have. But, you know, the Cascadia 16 might be a close choice. I'd be hard pressed between those and the Hokas. Although, as I mentioned, Hokas on very soft ground are not going to be the best shoe because it's going to have just too much movement in the shoe. It's going to slow you down too much.
So for me, it's the difference between having a Hoka for the dry days and the harder trails and a Speed Cross for the wet days and the muddy trails. I say, hey, I'm going to compromise. I'm going to have, you know, the one pair, even though, you know, I'm talking about 3 pairs of shoes that I have here on the table, but that's because I do this a lot. I'm going to have the one pair that's going to try to do all of it, or that's going to be able to get around, you know, a 10-mile trail that's going to have sections of all of these different conditions.
Sure. So when you're buying your own shoes, I'd buy a couple. Try them on. See how they work. A lot of companies let you return shoes online. Hoka and Brooks, for example, let you do that. They let you try them out for Hoka's 30 days. I think Brooks is like 90 days. And if you don't like them, you can return them. This way you can find the shoe that fits for you. And that's kind of the ultimate thing. You got to find what works for you and realize that the first shoe you may try may not be the best shoe for you. Lone Peaks were one of the first ones I bought, and that's what I couldn't run. So.
Okay, I haven't had that quite that bad of an experience. I will say, though, I had a bad day out on a 7-mile run, and these boys one day, and man, were they stiff, and my feet really hurt, and shins went the whole deal. Again, because I was running in the wrong shoe for the type of terrain that I was trying to run. On a very muddy day, or on like a hike where I'm trying to like scramble up rocks, these things are great. The other thing that I would say in terms of choosing a shoe as maybe like a little bit of a clue, if you have road running shoes that you really like for a given brand, maybe start with that brand's trail shoes. Even though, you know, Brooks, I think, has at least 4 different models of trail shoes.
Only one in wide, which is the GTS, which is the one I like.
For trail, though.
Oh, for trail? These are the only wide ones they make.
They only make wide in the Cascadia, so maybe you're stuck in the Cascadia if you have hobbit feet like Paul. But for the rest of us, sorry, Paul, you've got the Caldera, the Divide, the Cascadia, and the Catamount are what Brooks makes. I say this because I've got the experience of having run in the Brooks Adrenaline GTS. I'm on my 3rd iteration of those, and I wanted something that was going to be more like that, or at least to me, just had that feeling of commonality between the 2 platforms, which is why I decided to try the Cascadias and have kind of stuck with those. Whereas with the Ultras, it was like nothing that I'd ever worn before, and that's both good and bad. It's quite an adjustment between these and my Adrenaline GTS road shoes.
So I hope the video was helpful for you and get you out and trying to do some trail running. If you liked the video, please let us know in the comments. Mike and I put together another one, maybe on road shoes or on socks. There's a lot of gear when it comes to running, and we're happy to share our experiences and get you out there on the trails. Thank you for joining us.